My professional background is a residential home builder here in Kingston, which I've been doing for the last 15 years, and I'm also a property developer. And before I delve into the costs associated with the club, I wanted to take the time to recognize some members, many of whom are here tonight, who got the ball rolling on this whole project about 3 years ago. And those are former executive members who approached me, Taco being one of them, Igor, Anise, who's not here, and Doug Bowie invited me out to lunch about 3 years ago, and we began discussions about the possibility of building a new clubhouse. And I think it was their insight at the time that recognized the utility of the current clubhouse was somewhat limited, and we needed to make some progress moving forward to get going on a new clubhouse. And that's how my involvement began about 3 years ago. I came on to the executive 2 years ago, spent a year on the executive, and then have been involved ever since as a committee member on the capital project subcommittee, the members of which you saw on an earlier slide. So lastly, I'm one of a handful of people, I think, in addition to Kit, who I see in there often, who has the courage to take a shower in that men's shower that you saw earlier. So we broke down the costs into 3 separate slides, and I apologize how small everything is, and I understand that an email did go out, I believe, several days ago that contained these same numbers, so hopefully you printed it off and had a chance to at least take a gander at it in advance. But I'm going to run you through the numbers line by line quickly. So the big magic number, you add it all together, $1,548,000. Where we sit right now is Infrastructure Ontario have a rule, and Tom's going to allude to this next in his presentation about how we're going to finance this and what our financing plans are, but they have sort of an 80-20 rule. If they're going to loan us 80% of the money, they want us putting 20% of our own skin in the game. So our 20% of that $1.5 million above it would be $292,000. We've spent 38 to date. That leaves a contribution of $254,000 still remaining. We're sitting on cash in the bank as of our September 30th, 2015 financial statements of $183,000. That leaves a shortfall of $71,000 to contribute to make our 20%, assuming we get the 80% borrowing from Infrastructure Ontario. And where that money would come from would be next year's revenues, which Tom will allude to. Lastly is a refundable securities deposit. It's not a net cost to us, and it's an in-out transaction. And what this is the city, in their wisdom, requires anybody who's doing construction to post a letter of credit or securities, and this is in the form of a letter, but we have to have the borrowing capacity that sits behind that letter, and this is to ensure completion of the project. If we mismanage the project and come up short, then the city intervenes, utilizes that letter of credit and tries to finish the project. That's it for the numbers, and now I'm going to pass the mic back to Paula, who's going to introduce our treasurer.
And the current members are Tom Thayer, our new treasurer as of last October. And his background is he's a chartered accountant. He's the former director of finance at Queen's. He's now retired, and he's been on the boards of several organizations throughout his career, so he brings a lot of varied experience to the committee. We also have Bill Cannon, our chair today. He's a professor of finance at Queen's, and he's also chaired many committees, and he's been the pension committee at Queen's. So he's been dealing with millions of dollars at Queen's and has a lot of knowledge on how money works. Eric Davies, who's just been up on the floor, he's got his MBA, and he's a current property developer. He's also used to dealing with a lot of funds. Gord Lee, in the front row here. He's a former treasurer of Queen's. He left the position in spring voluntarily to move on into the private world, and he now manages a money investment fund there. And myself, I'm also on the committee. I get to be on pretty well every committee as president, whether I want to or not. And I do have a bit of a finance background as a commerce degree, and I'm also a business owner. So that's who we have guiding the capital project as far as financial knowledge. And the main issues, Eric's mentioned several of them that the committee's been examining, is first of all working with what our resources are, which we have a $2.2 million property, which gives us a lot of collateral to base loans on. And with our current cash flow, we're doing very well to be able to make payments on in interest and principal. We have explored through Gord Lee, liaising with the banks as to what they would offer in Infrastructure Ontario. And Infrastructure Ontario is the big winner as far as we're concerned to finance us. They're very approachable, they're friendly, collaborative, and they have great rates, and they will lock us in for 25 years. So we like everything that they say, and they seem to like us, which is good. So that's the background on the Finance Committee, and I'm now going to turn the floor over to Tom to give you more details.
You received 8 pages of stuff about hopefully 2 days ago. I'm sorry it came so late, but numbers change. Every time we change a number, it takes 6 hours to ripple it through everything, so that was driving us gradually crazy. All right. At the end of this, I hope you're able to answer the question, can we afford it? So we'll work our way through. I might as well start with this first slide here. Where is the money coming from to pay for this thing? And there are basically 3 sources. Kingston Tennis Club savings. Over the years, after we paid off our debt, we've been putting money aside, accumulating a balance, investing it at paltry rates, but the best rates we could get. $183,000 at the end of the last fiscal year. Now we expect another 100,000 or so, 100,000 or so this coming year. So by October 1st, 2016, we expect to have $285,000 available for this project. The second source of funding has been talked about a little bit. It's called the Trillium Grant. And we're applying for a capital grant from Trillium, the Ontario Trillium Foundation. $150,000 is the max we can get. Who knows how much we're going to get? Nobody knows. Could be 150, could be 0. But what I'd like to say a couple things about the Trillium Grant. Trillium gives away, well, first it has 3,000 applications a year, and it gives out 1,300 grants. So it's a little less than 50% of the people that are affected, that are successful. They give away $110 million a year, and they have 4 quarterly competitions. And we're in the process of applying for the grant. We have registered with Trillium, which is the first step. And by God, everything that they want, we had, as far as I was concerned. And Paul and I jointly did this registration, and Paula sent it in. They said it would take 4 weeks to process. We got our answer back 2 days later, you're in. Okay, the loan is the big thing, and it's about 60 to 80% of the money that's going to be used to pay for this project. There is nothing complicated about this loan. If you've had a house mortgage any time in your life, it's exactly that. It's a loan, it's secured by real property, and you pay principal and interest on a monthly basis. And that's what we would do with this loan. Infrastructure Ontario wants to see that you, as an organization, are able to pay this loan as it comes due. They want to make sure that you have cash flow coming in to cover the loan and then some. And in this particular case, when they say the 140% rule, they want to see that you're able to cover the principal and interest plus 40% beyond that. That 40% is a buffer, margin of error, whatever you want to call it. 40% beyond what you have to pay for the principal and interest. Let's say we get $1 million loan, and let's say on this loan, the annual principal and interest is $65,000 a year, and the cash surplus that we're realizing, that we're earning every year, the net cash inflow for the organization is $95,000. If you take 95,000 and divide 65,000 into it, you get 146%. Their target, they say, we like to see that ratio at 140% or more. They may loan to us at 130%, or they may loan to us 135%, but the greater that ratio is, the better off we are, the better our credit is. When we deal with Infrastructure Ontario, we're going to deal with our representative, who we've been dealing with for a couple of years. He is going to help us get everything together, get our application together, critique our projections and our financials, and then it will be forwarded to a credit committee, which will just assess the credit. And the higher that ratio, the better. They'll also look at the quality of earnings. They'll also look at the collateral. They'll look at many, many different things. But one of the things that we sort of have control over is how much money we earn. So this number is a very, very important number. The other thing I'd like to say is I think this rule really leads to good sort of financial administration. It means we have a buffer here. So if things go wrong, let's say we have, let's say there's a drop in membership, or let's say there's a drop in attendance at the junior camp or something of that sort, or maybe expenses go up. We sort of eat into that buffer a little bit, but we never miss a payment on that $65,000. So that's why having that buffer there is important. The money that we have to pay off this loan is all money we're going to earn in the future. So it's very important for us to come up with fair, reasonably accurate, intelligent, not outlandish projections. And so in the material that I sent out, I tried to produce some projections for revenue and expense that went out for 5 years. I mean, we could go out 30 years or however long we went, but I mean 5 years was probably good enough. And in determining these projections, the thing that drives the projections are the assumptions. And I made projections under 3 scenarios, 3 different sets of assumptions. There was an optimistic, a neutral, and a pessimistic scenario. And the difference between the 3 scenarios is basically revenue. And there are 2 revenue items, or 2 revenue categories that stand out. Number 1 is membership fees. This last year, I think it was $113,000. It represents, I think, maybe 60% or 70% of our total revenue. And there are really no costs directly associated with it. And the other important category in making projections is junior camps. The net that we earned this year in junior camps was $28,000. The previous year we earned $39,000. When I say net, it's the gross income minus the wages we paid to the people that were in the junior camps, minus the expenses and minus the HST. And so 2 years ago, or last year, well, 2 years ago it was $39,000, last year it was $28,000. Okay, the first thing that I want to mention, and this is true of all scenarios, is an increase in the membership fees that is a 10% capital improvement fee in 2016. And the effect of this is a big increase. The effect of this is for a student, the fee is going to go up $18, increasing to $198. For an adult membership, it's going to go up $28, increasing to $313, and so on. And there are a number of questions about, this fee. Is it going to be there in 2017? Well, what I'd say is it will be $198 in 2017 too. And depending on what we do, we set our fees once a year. If we add inflation, then it's going to be $204 in 2017. So that's going to be a big piece of new revenue. Now, in my assumptions for revenue, in the optimistic assumption, I said there would be no change in membership in 2016. And in 2017, under the optimistic scenario, I said membership would increase by 25 people. That would bring it up to about something like 575. And there would be a 2% increase in an inflationary increase in the fee. And in 2018, there would be another 5% increase in membership, bringing us up to about 600 members. And then after that, no increase at all in membership. But the fees would continue to increase approximately with inflation. In the pessimistic scenario, and I know this is not pessimistic for some people, not pessimistic enough, but in 2016, we levy a fee of 10%, and membership goes down 5%. So we lose 25 members. And then after that, fees increase at approximately 1/2 of inflation. So that amounts to about 1% a year. There is nothing in here for increased revenue from selling drinks, selling alcohol, beer, food, whatever. And I know in the business plan that was prepared in June 2014, there was fairly substantial revenue on that. There's no revenue in here for renting rooms. There's no revenue in here for any of that other ancillary income. It does not mean that we're not going to be doing those things, but I'm just assuming that if we do decide to do them, we'll plan and determine the feasibility of whether they're economic or not at the time we go ahead with doing it. We're not going to talk about that now, so I'm neutral in that regard. We're not going to make any money in those things, and we're not going to lose any money in those things. The other thing that I haven't mentioned about assumptions, which are very, very important, is inflation on expenses. And generally, I'm allowing for 2% inflation on expenses. Building-related expenses, I've got fairly steep increases, hydro doubles. I think taxes over 4 years or 5 years double. Other things go up as well, things that are building related. This is where I've tried to put it all together, and this is on the conclusion section of the report on page 3, and the numbers have all changed. So these numbers may not be what you see in the chart on page 3, but this sort of spells out the full project, which adds up the remaining cost of finance, $1,000,005. And this is if we don't get Trillium. If we don't get Trillium, I wouldn't say we're out of luck, but it's going to put a dent in things. It's going to slow up the project. We're going to have to phase the project. So we'd start with these two numbers are the same. We have to demolish the clubhouse. This number is the same. And we come up with a remaining cost of finance of $1,171,421. The money available, the KTC money available for the project, that was on the first slide, $285,000. If we get the full Trillium grant, and we may get anything between the full grant and zero, if we get the full Trillium grant, we'll have $435,000 to put against the project. This means the debt required would be $1,075,000. And under this result, it would be basically $886,000. The annual principal and interest using an amortizing loan at 4.5%, $60,000 a year. Annual principal using an amortizing loan to finance $1,075,000 would be this number here. Actually, it's a little bit smaller than that number there. And this is what our cash flow is assumed to be in 2017 under the neutral scenario, and we have a ratio of 1.4, 1.6 here. Financial feasibility, the financial risks. Trillium grant application is not successful. We've sort of talked about that already. We don't really know, but if it is successful, we could undertake the whole project with our current resources. If it's not successful, we'd have to phase the project in. Construction costs higher than expected. I don't think they're going to be higher than expected. But what happens, from my experience in these construction projects, is things are going along great and you find a change that you'd like to make. And by God, it's only $50,000, and we got to have that because it'll make the project so much better. So you put in $50,000, and that's, that increases the cost of the project. So that's the sort of thing that I think runs up the cost of the project. If we go over by 10%, we have just about enough contingencies to take care of that. Cash flow increase or cash inflow decreases. That's always a possibility. If 30% of our members did not renew in 2016, that would mean we lose about $30,000 worth of the project, $30,000 of revenue. It would bring our revenue down from 102 down to $70,000. So, that would be a very difficult thing. If it went down 20%, it would bring it to $8,000. We could probably continue this part of the project. But that's what the buffer is there for. Things come and go. Sometimes the revenue goes up and sometimes it doesn't. But I should also say about our cash inflow is it's very stable. I look back to 2010, and from 2010 to 2015, which is 6 years, our revenue per year went up, increased from 2010 to 2015 by $67,000, and our expenses only increased by $14,000. So that's pretty good. I think over the years people have kept a lid on the expenses and grown revenues such as lessons and membership revenue and also junior camp revenue. So that's been fairly good. Long-term interest rate increases. Right now, according to the site, Infrastructure Ontario site, it's 4.04%. It could go higher. The interest rate you always hear about is the short-term rate, and the Government of Canada wants to boost the short-term rate. The long-term rate is subject to a different set of influences than the short-term rate. And most people I've spoken to, in fact everybody I've spoken to, says they just simply don't see the factors which would cause that to go up wildly. Maybe it'll go up to 4.5, maybe it'll go up to 5%. 100 basis points in the long-term rate is a big deal, but it may happen. The thing that worries me a little bit is that we don't fix a rate until April or May of 2017, and that's about 18 months away. That's a long time to wait, and lots of things can happen. Now, in the interim, we could fix a rate with Infrastructure Ontario, but it's expensive to do so. I think most people would advise us just to sit and wait. Okay, that's all I have.
There is a resolution that I'm going to be putting forward on behalf of the board, and that is to proceed with the capital project as outlined in the presentation to the membership of November 22nd, 2015, with regard to the new clubhouse and 8th court, and widening and lighting of courts 2 and 3. All aspects of the project will be completed simultaneously if total funds allow. Otherwise, work will be done in stages as financially feasible. So,
Paul has moved that motion. Is there a seconder to the motion? Seconding it. We're not planning on voting on it right here. Paul, can you tell us how we vote?
So voting will be done electronically. There will be a notice going out to the membership tomorrow, probably in the afternoon, with an email address to send your votes to. And each person will vote once. The email will give you instructions on what to do as well as where to email. But basically you include, it'll be your personal email. We'd like you to use your email that's tied to the club so we can identify you as a member to make sure it's a legitimate vote. Include your name in the email just in case you have some crazy email address that we don't recognize. And put your voting preference, for, against, abstention, in the contents of the email. And there'll be 3 people tabulating the votes. Lynn Hansen, our board secretary, will be one of the people. And we have Kristen Cote, one of our members. She's halfway back there. And we have Bud Nelson, our former membership director, who will also be participating. So those 3 people are the 3 people receiving the votes. They'll tabulate them, ensure that they're coming from full members, and then they'll report to the board as to the results. And they will be keeping the contents confidential. Okay, yeah, and every full member is eligible to vote. For people who weren't here at the presentation, they will also have the opportunity to vote whether they're in town or out of town. And we, along with the email that goes out tomorrow, there will be some information to summarize the presentation to inform people that weren't able to attend as well. So they have a bit of background knowledge to inform them before they make their vote. And we are going to have voting over 7 days, so you don't have to rush and send in your vote. You can take time to talk to your friends, your neighbors, think things over, review more of the numbers if you didn't quite follow everything today, and just have your vote in by next Sunday at the end of the day. All members who are 18 and over can vote. If you're part of a family membership, as many family members who are 18 and over and are full members. Anyone who joined from September 1st onwards is not a full member. But they do have to send in a separate email for each vote. You can't send in one family vote. It's only one vote per email.